If your Speed 6 ride height looks anything like mine, and particularly if you're running an upgraded rear white line sway bar, or maybe even a stock sway bar, like I said, with this lower height, you most likely have an issue that you don't even know is occurring. Alright, unfortunately, I think I threw away the stock end links, so I can't really show this as well as I thought I could, but I can still demonstrate this in a way you guys can hopefully understand and sort of see something you might not be aware of. If you see here, there is a clear sort of grind in this control arm, and there's clear markings on the sway bar where the control arm was hitting it. I'm going to go and throw this bolt back in and go ahead and jack up the suspension so you can see exactly why that's actually happening. Alright, so if my memory serves me correctly, I believe the stock end links were about 3 inches from the top stud to the lower bolt. So we're going to go ahead and stick this tape measure up here, get our measurement correct, and it's going to be right about there. So you can see this is with the suspension fully unloaded. There is maybe a 1/2 inch gap between the sway bar and this control arm, and that's with it being already sort of grooved from the way it was before. It's going to be hard to sort of get this accurate, but we could try. We're going to go ahead and jack up the suspension, and you can see where it actually begins to hit the sway bar through its travel. That's about ride height for my car, and you can see the sway bar is actually touching this lower control arm. And the reason this is a problem is because once this sway bar starts to contact this arm, it actually acts as its own spring. Pretty much it'll bind against that, and it'll use the actual sway bar to try and prevent the car from compressing any farther, which can make the car unreliable and put a ton of stress on your sway bar mounts, the subframe, even wear mounts. It could just do a lot of bad stuff you really don't want to have happen. And I noticed this, and I was really surprised no one's actually talked about this. So I did figure out a way to fix it, and it's not exactly bolt in, but it's really not too difficult, especially if you have an angle grinder and just some basic mechanical understanding. And I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys how to fix that all today. So knowing that the factory end links are too short, and that's the reason the sway bar actually contacts the arm, the solution to fixing this problem is in the shape of these right here. These are adjustable rear end links. These aren't actually ones sold for the Speed 6, but surprisingly they do work out for the Speed 6 pretty well. It's a company, I believe it's AWR, that makes some for the Speed 6. But I didn't buy those because I don't know how long you can actually get them. Knowing our stock ones are 3 inches, maybe you can get them to like 4 inches, but I wasn't exactly sure. These I could be sure, and these I was able to fit very easily. These, along with a few other parts, are actually SPL branded sway bar end links, and these are actually for a GR86 or Scion FRS or GT86 or BRZ, all those things. These are actually rears for those cars. And I did a couple measurements, found out these come from the factory at 4 inches with adjustability to make them even longer. They have a 10mm stud, and they have a 10mm lower bolt. There's only 2 things you need to do to actually get these to fit on the car, and it's really not as difficult as you would think. Number 1 being the stud length. These are a bit long, so they will contact your springs, at least if you have coilovers on your car. Maybe stock suspension stuff, this wouldn't be as big of an issue, or even lowering springs. But I did find these to be a little too long, so I did have to cut them down a little bit. So with the stud threads cut down, I ended up just about under an inch. You could leave it a little longer at maybe 1 inch, and that would give you enough room to actually get the nut behind there and bolt them in and tighten them properly. But I just wanted to cut it down a little shorter. They end up working out fine. And the other more notable thing you need to do to modify these is actually shorten these little spacers. These pop out of these very easily. I'll go ahead and show you now. So these are actually the small spacers that allow these to work properly with their heim jointed ends, and these are what come in the system. But the problem with the GR86 is it's designed to work with these being about 3 inches apart from each other. So the total distance from this end to this end would be about 3 inches, whereas the Speed 6 needs to be much shorter, actually about 1 1/8 inches to fit between the stock control arm mounting holes. Here you can see on the Speed 6 rear suspension, our measurement between there is going to be about 1 1/8 inches, and that is the distance you need in order for these these sway bar end links to slide down in and fit. Since these come in at about 3 inches, I found cutting a 1/2 inch off of each of these little spacers gets you where you need to be. Once you press these back in, your actual overall length is about 1 1/8 inches, and they end up sliding in the control arms just fine. And with those 2 things trimmed, that's actually all you need to get these to fit right into the factory Speed 6 arms. And I'll go ahead and show you now installing these and showing you how they actually fix the geometry of that rear sway bar. All right, now for demonstration, I've already thrown this back together with the new end link and no spring. You can see there's already a little bit more space here, but you'll really see the space gain whenever I actually jack this up completely. I'll go ahead and show you right there. You can see while it is extremely close, it's actually not touching quite yet. Here we have a small piece of cardboard, and we should be able to squeeze this right between the two. It does take a little bit of effort because it's still cardboard, but it squeezes just past it. And this is actually, with this suspension, more compressed than you'll probably ever have it. If you go ahead and take a look up here, this is with our top bump stop nearly touching the control arm there, and this bottom bump stop actually already engaged. This wheel would be very high into the chassis. I'll actually put the wheel on so you can see just how far this is up in the chassis. That is how far this will go up before it actually ends up hitting that bump stop, and that means that your sway bar is fully active until this point, in which the suspension isn't active anyways because of your bump stop, and they're stopping the actual compression of it any farther. Now, while the rear of the car is the only part I actually found an issue, that's not all I was able to modify. I wanted to make it a point to go ahead and get some SPL front links as well, and this is what I found out. Just like the rear, there is a few modifications needed, a little bit more than the rear I'd say, but also just like the rear, these are for GR86 as well. These are actually the front variant of their Swaybar end links. They actually have two different versions. They have a longer one for stock ride height cars and a lowered one for short ride height cars, or a short one for low ride height cars, and this actually I still have to modify, but it does work pretty well. In order to get these to work, you do actually have to modify the end links themselves, and it's going to be involving cutting them down about 1 inch total to get them to about 6.5 inches in end-to-end length here. That way you can actually put them on the car without them binding on anything. If you just throw them in as is, they will likely hit the lower control arms and just not really work out too well, so this is what I found out about doing. It did work out really well, and I'll go ahead and show you guys in the car now. Now, I keep talking about shortening these end links, but this is how it's actually done. This is a spare end link I have for the rear of my Z, and I'll go ahead and show the process on this just because I don't have another one I want to really take apart and show the process. So this is what you actually do. You're going to take your end link and you're going to just take it apart and do it in its pieces like so. You're going to pull the ends out of it and just be left with the center section. Now obviously this isn't a good demonstration because this is already very short, but in these longer ones it does work out the same way. What you're going to do is you're going to pull these off and you're going to mark a 1/2 inch off this threaded section here, and you're going to mark a 1/2 inch off of both ends of your center piece, or in this case 1/2 inch off of here and a 1/2 inch off of both of these ends. Once you cut it, you're actually able to shorten this about 1 inch because there's a 1/2 inch taken off of both ends. That way this gets you 1 inch shorter end length while still getting some adjustability in there and still working out properly. After you cut that down, you're simply just going to put it back together as it was designed to go. I will say you need to be very careful when you start threading these on to ensure that you're not actually going to cross thread the center section. I would recommend leaving these nuts on while you cut these outer sections and then just simply threading them off, which will allow you to sort of clean up your threads on the way out. But you just want to be really careful not to strip these because this center section is aluminum while these outsides are steel, so it would be very easy to strip it if you were to start throwing it on sideways. But now with your end link modified, we're going to go ahead and actually go over to the car and show you what you need to modify if you want to use these GR86 end links. Over at the car now, you can see where our end links are going to mount up. They're going to fit in right here and down there at the sway bar. Now, when you're actually going to put these in, you'll find that the end link threads are too big for the stock Speed 6 sway bar and mount. It's because these use a 12mm stud while the stock one uses a 10mm stud. It is very easy to drill these out, at least on this top one because it's a cast iron piece. You could drill through that to 12mm, but I found the sway bar extremely difficult to drill through because it's actually a hardened steel. So you could try drilling through, but what I ended up doing was using a double carbide bit on a Dremel and actually just wallowing out that hole to accept the 12mm studs, and now it works phenomenally. You can see there's still plenty of meat on the metal, both on the sway bar and on its lower bracket. So you don't really have to worry about it breaking or snapping off the ends because you've taken out material. It actually works out just fine, and I've tested the car plenty and put thousands of miles on it since this, and I haven't developed play in the end lengths, and I haven't developed any problems in the front end or the rear end. Assembly in the front end is actually extremely easy, though very difficult when you first get these parts, and the reason is because these joints are extremely difficult to move, and even though they're breaking in now, they're still very hard to move. But nonetheless, when it comes to insulation, all you'll be doing is simply sliding it into your mounts like so, and then getting your bottom one in the sway bar as well. Now, SPL recommends their hardware be torqued to 60 foot-pounds, so that's exactly what I'm going to do with this torque wrench right now, and that's really it for this install. Like I said, while it's not quite a bolt-in, it is a low modification install for a very high-quality part to be on your vehicle that you know won't be a problem. Now, I did want to point out, because you're moving the sway bar down slightly, because this is still a little bit longer than the factory setup, these arms down here will get a little close, but they will not touch, and I have confirmed that under all conditions. I did track the car under extreme body roll, a lot of curbing, and a lot of turning, and this actually has never hit. So I'll go and demonstrate that now. So you can see that right there is going to be full lock, and there is still plenty of room between the two. You could actually just fit fingers under between there, so not a biggie. These have not contacted, and I'm confident in saying that. Now, to my surprise, when I actually first got this car, I really felt like the rear end was really stiff. It had Fortunato springs on it, so a 12K front and a 6K rear spring. And I always thought the rear was way stiffer than I feel like it should have been. And it wasn't until I got into the car and actually looked at it at ride height where I figured out that the sway bar is actually contacting the control arm, and that's what's preventing it from feeling any softer, which I guess in the case of this car is kind of a positive because these cars really do benefit from a stiffer rear spring. But the main issue here is the fact that you're not allowing your sway bar to actually do its job, or the springs for that matter, by it being limited to about this ride height on the stock setup with the stock rear sway bar end links. You're not really letting the car compress and actually do what it's designed to do under launching or acceleration or anything else. But you're also not really allowing the sway bar to let the car work the way it's designed. Obviously, all these systems go together to work properly and to have the car have good driving dynamics, and by binding them up, you're kind of ruining that ability to handle properly. As I stated earlier in the video, I've driven this car countless miles, and I've gone to a track day and a bunch of canyon runs, and I've had no issues with these end links. They're extremely high quality. Like I said, even on other cars, if you guys have watched the videos before, you probably have heard this story once or twice already, but these end links have never given me problems. They never develop play. Nothing is binding. The front end, nothing binds. The rear end, nothing binds. It just works properly as it should. Everything is working as designed by Mazda, even though the car is heavily modified now with a much lower ride height, different camber settings, different tow settings. It just all works so properly, and I have zero issues with it. And I highly recommend anyone who's really into this sort of driving your car scene to take these steps to make your car handle better and just be more reliable when it comes to end length strength and sway bar usage.